Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
Greg Bowser, president of the Louisiana Chemical Association, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Consumers and property owners with construction projects can have a successful result or regretful experiences that could have been avoided. Before any construction project, verify licensure of the contractor and check references. Scammers will claim to be insured or bonded, so always check first. Download our app, LA Contractor, from the Android or Apple Store. Visit our website, lacontractor.org, or contact the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. We're here to help before things go wrong. Hire a licensed contractor. It's the law.
Spadel's Florist was founded over 30 years ago. From my mom's kitchen, we have grown into one of the largest florists in this area. There's a sense in our community that you stick together, good times or bad. And oil and gas is part of that family. They're my neighbors. They're my customers. They're the person I'm sitting next to at church. If oil and gas is doing well, all of our businesses are doing well. We are Louisiana Oil and Gas.
The LCTCS Foundation advocates for every Louisiana community and technical college in the system to keep them on the cutting edge of training and technology. Aligned with businesses across the state, they ensure students develop the highest possible level of skills, keeping Louisiana business and industry ahead of the pack. Visit this website to support the LCTCS Foundation for a higher Louisiana for all.
Passion, experience, safety. These are what set Arkell Constructors apart as a premier general contractor. At Arkell Constructors, our goal is to exceed our clients' expectations, whether it's commercial, industrial, or facility maintenance. We have the team and processes in place to provide a solution for you. To us, every project is a resume for our future. Arkell Constructors, the solution for your next building project.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Very pleased to be joined by my friend Greg Bowser. He's president of the Louisiana Chemical Association. Buddy, welcome back.
Oh, it's always good to be here, Tim, especially, just talking about the everyday goings on in our industry.
Yeah, and it's an important industry to our state and to our economy. So I would suspect that most of the people that watch this show regularly understand what the Louisiana Chemical Association is, but
Right.
Give us a little primer. Update us.
Yeah, we're a trade association. We started in 1959. So this coming fall, we'll celebrate 60 years of the chemical association in Baton Rouge, in Louisiana. And we represent about 63 major chemical companies located at about 100 different sites around the state, primarily in Lake Charles between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. We have a few in North Louisiana, but for the most part, that's where our industry is concentrated. And doing well. The industry is, we employ about 27, almost 30,000 direct employees, and we have another probably 6 times that contractors and other people that touch the industry.
Yeah, I want to talk specifically about that overall economic impact because it is huge and critically important in our state. But in addition to the actual chemical manufacturers that are part of the organization, you have a sister association called the Louisiana Chemical Industry Alliance. Mm-hmm. And we talk about the spinoff jobs,
right.
The multiplier effect that the industry creates. And it does more than just create jobs, it creates companies, really.
Yeah,
and this LCIA is part of that. Tell us about it.
It is. And you talk about the spinoff in terms of individual jobs. Some people use anywhere from a 5 to 7 multiplier, okay, in terms of direct jobs and the spinoffs. You take that and you look at just the spinoffs on companies. LCIA, which is our vendor company association that we started in 1989, and to get them involved with our industry. And that's anybody who does business with the chemical industry. Any company can be a member that does business with the industry that has the same interest. We started it as a way of educating, informing our vendors as to what we do, what our concerns are, and what projects are coming down the road. LCIA has 850 members. So you can see how huge that is. That's the impact of the chemical industry. And this is for the most part Louisiana-owned businesses
right.
that do business with us.
Well, you do the math, right? So if you think about 60 or so individual corporations, chemical manufacturing corporations that exist in our state, and over 850
more than 10 times
companies that are part of the LCIA, you can see the impact that the industry has, because those companies within the LCIA are great companies like Brown & Root, which is a wonderful sponsor of this show, Arkell Constructors, great sponsor of this show. And they create hundreds and hundreds of jobs on their own. And it is a direct result of the impact that the industry you lead has in our state.
Yeah, and it's a very unique and diverse group of companies. You have large companies, you have the Turners, their members, you have smaller companies that are members, you have minority-owned companies, you have some women-owned businesses. So it's a very unique number of people. And now you have to understand that those companies also have vendors.
Right.
So there goes the multiplier again. So a chemical industry creates a number of jobs and great spinoff. Creates a lot of sales tax, a lot of income for people who work there and live there. And one of the things that we try to do, and our companies do, is to be part of the community. They're the fabric of the community. They're the people who, their employees coach softball, they raise their kids there, they live there. I mean, that's what we do.
They are heavily invested in those communities where these plants exist. Let's, think about that. You talk about these companies. Our mutual friend Eddie Risponi, candidate for governor, with his brother Jerry, founded a very successful company, Industrial Specialty Contractors, another one of those. But we also think about the spinoff effect and the economy that these plants create in terms of the restaurants and the car dealerships. Absolutely. These are not direct sort of descendants of the chemical plants, but where they exist, we know that the restaurants will do better. We know that the car dealerships will do better. We know that the schools will have greater support. You talk about that community involvement. All very critical elements that are spinoffs from your industry.
Yeah, they are. And when you look at statistics, for example, you talked about schools. You look at the parishes that spend the most on their schools. Those parishes have high industry in them. You have about 12 to 13 parishes that are heavy industry parishes. They're also your richer parishes as they go with respect to school funding, with respect to sales tax, even property tax, teacher pay, all of that, because of the spinoff and the amount of revenue that just having that facility there causes to be involved in the community.
We often get focused just on the property tax that is part of the industrial property tax exemption that we'll talk about a little bit later, but you're right. Sales taxes, payroll taxes, that spinoff is huge. In 2017, 2018, the industry had almost $55 billion worth of chemical products produced in Louisiana, $9.7 billion in chemical products that were exported from Louisiana. Talk about that part of the economic impact as well, Greg.
Yeah, one of the things we do export a lot of them. We don't do a lot of finished products here in Louisiana, and a big part of it is because from a population center, most of the population is on the east and west coast. So so it's easier to ship in bulk and do the finished product closer to the customers. But that doesn't stop the amount of business that goes on with these plants. You talk about that investment. We have one in Lake Charles. Sassaw is coming online. They just finished a huge investment. Recently, Formosa announced a $1.4 billion investment in St. James Parish. I mean, that's huge. And so those are the kinds of things that you talk about get a community excited, should get a community excited, because that means better infrastructure, that means better sales tax, that just means an opportunity to do a lot of things different and to put the spotlight on that community.
I want to talk more about the economic impact. I want to talk more about the projects. I also want to come back from this break and talk about the products. We mentioned that all of these plants are out there producing things that are eventually turned into products that we touch and use every day and that make our lives better. And I think that's sometimes a left out part of the story that is critically important. We'll take a break. We'll come back and talk about those things. We're visiting with Greg Bowser. He's the president of the Louisiana Chemical Association, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Since 1919, we've designed and constructed hundreds of industrial plants, roads, ships, dams, and executed some of the most complex jobs in the world. In fact, our quality and dependability are legendary. Today, the legend continues as Brown & Root delivers engineering, construction, maintenance, and industrial specialty services throughout the U.S. and the world from our headquarters here in Louisiana.
We are Brown and Root.
ExxonMobil Baton Rouge keeps the local economy rolling. Our new aviation project created hundreds of jobs, drove millions of dollars to local businesses, and poured thousands more into our community to improve schools. 1 in 8 jobs in our parish can be traced back to ExxonMobil. Tomorrow's Baton Rouge is built by what we do today. A little energy goes a long way. ExxonMobil Baton Rouge. Energy lives here.
The 1012 Industry Report is excited to announce the 1012 Industry Weekly. This e-newsletter is free and comes to your inbox every Tuesday. All you have to do is sign up at 1012industryreport.com. 1012 Industry Report is an award-winning magazine serving South Louisiana's petrochemical and oil and gas industries. From Lake Charles to Baton Rouge and New Orleans, we cover the news, people, projects, and issues that matter to industry. The 1012 Industry Report magazine and weekly email. Sign up today.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Greg Bowser of the Louisiana Chemical Association is our guest. You mentioned, Greg, in the first segment about these massive projects, investment in our state, creating jobs for our people. And then obviously, as we talked about in the first segment, those spin-off economic multipliers that are out there. You mentioned a couple. You mentioned Sasol in Lake Charles. That plant now, $11+ billion investment that's coming online, hundreds and hundreds of new jobs. You mentioned Formosa down in St. James Parish. They've announced a $9+ billion investment there. Wanhua Chemical, $1.4 billion investment in St. James Parish. South Louisiana Methanol. Exxon has announced a close to $1 billion investment in the greater Baton Rouge area. These investments are critically important for our state. These projects are critically important for our states. We mentioned those construction companies that are part of LCIA. They all thrive because of this. Since about 2012, I think there's been something like 60 major projects announced. It's $155 billion worth of investment and 19,000 new jobs. Right. What other industry could possibly have that kind of impact?
None that I know of, and it's really interesting to see how Louisiana has been able to compete with other states because, you know, many years ago when I first started doing this business, most of the competition was for plants overseas. Now the competition has come down shores. I mean, we compete with our neighbors in Texas and Mississippi and other places, and so it's very competitive. And the incentive market is there, and you know, the margins are so much so that it just takes a little bit tweaking here and there, and you could really get out of whack, and then find yourself losing projects.
Well, let's go down that trail because you know, you and I have talked on the radio. We've talked over the course of the years on this show specifically about our competitiveness. Because you mentioned it, when we go out to compete for this investment that literally could go anywhere in the world, we compete against Texas and its massive scale and its lack of a state income tax and its investment in its infrastructure. We compete against Mississippi and Alabama, but we compete against China and we compete against Singapore and we compete against Canada and we compete against Australia and a lot of different places. And so it is critically important that we keep our tools sharp. Changes that have been made to the industrial tax exemption program by Governor Edwards, which has been the cornerstone of our economic development incentive package, have had an impact. Now, the governor says that really we haven't seen much from it, that we are still among the most competitive incentive programs in the country. My response to that is, look, if we're just equal to Texas in our incentive packages, we lose because of all the other things that Texas has going for it in terms of its public education system, in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of its tax policy. Your thoughts?
Well, I think first of all, you know, I've heard the statement that our industrial tax exemption program is still the most competitive there is. That's not true. That's just not correct. For example, you can only get 80% in Louisiana. And you take a look at the millage rates in Louisiana, they're higher than anywhere else. Texas, for example, and people like to use Texas, you can get up to 100%. I mean, just take that fact alone and tell me how you're competitive. Just that one fact. If they can do 100% with their millage rate, and we can't do but 80, and we have the higher millage rate as you go around the parishes, tell me how you're competitive, just on that. And so it's not correct. And then you talk about scale, you talk about the number of people, you talk about all the other stuff. They do it differently. They don't tax certain things that we tax. You mentioned a corporate income tax. There's no corporate or individual income tax in Texas. We have that. Those are the kinds of things that, that just don't make us competitive. And, a lot of times I have to tell people, it's kind of like I do with my kids. Just because you say it enough time doesn't make it true.
Right.
And that's what we have to do.
And I think that's what we're seeing. And we talked about it. I've had, as you know, in the work that I do, a lot of conversations with industry leaders as well. And I had a conversation a few months ago with an industry leader who specifically told me that a major multi-billion-dollar project that had come down to Louisiana or Texas went to Texas for two specific reasons. One was the uncertainty at the time about the industrial tax exemption, so they really kind of gave it a 0 because they weren't sure if they could get through all of the local approval processes. And the second and a critical factor was the quality of the infrastructure, that there was a very poor 2-lane highway leading to the site in Louisiana, and there was world-class infrastructure around the site in Texas. Yeah. We can't compete on a level playing field. We've got to be more aggressive than Texas, and that's where my major concern is. I know when you talk to industry leaders, you hear the same thing. Yeah,
you hear the same thing, and you talk about competing in our industry. Our infrastructure is at a point to where I'm not sure we can compete in any industry. From a purely business perspective, just think about this. If you live in East Baton Rouge Parish and you happen to have a business in Port Allen or in Plaquemine, you can't get your employees back and forth. And that's not even, if you're just a grocery store owner, you can't get them back and forth. Right. That is a problem. And I think we have to address that. I tell people all the time, I like to use the analogy, basketball analogy. If you have a basketball team and your shortest guy is 6'5", so everybody's 6'5" and above, and you're playing a team that their tallest guy is 5'10". Yeah. And you tell your players, look, when you get a rebound, the first thing I want you to do is bring the ball down below your waist. Well, you're going to put them in the game. And so we're saying, what we're going to do with our industrial tax exemption, we're going to make it harder to get. And then, because we're competing against those other guys, but we're going to make ours as hard to get as theirs is. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's an incentive. It's not a luxury. It's an incentive to try to sway people your way. You're not going to win like that.
One of the greatest misconceptions out there, too, is that, look, these plants aren't going anywhere. They're going to come here anyway. Listen, they have teams of accountants looking at these actuarial tables to decide where these investment goes. And they're going to put these investments in places where they can have the greatest chance for the greatest return. Take a break. We come back. I want to focus on the products, want to focus on the upcoming legislative session and the elections that we have right around the corner. We're visiting with Greg Bowser. He's the president of the Louisiana Chemical Association. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
I just see the positive things on the horizon, and BRAC is a real integral part of that.
BRAC's taken a very forward role in trying to help align people and align strategies and align solutions.
You'll find that you'll have an opportunity at BRAC to make a difference.
It's about being a part of conversations and really having a voice in terms of how we move the city forward.
A lot of my friends were in college and stuff, which is great. It wasn't the route for me, and financially, I know it's tough on a lot of people, so I saw welding. At first, my instinct was like, what pays the most money? So I was like, welding, that's the way to go. It made a great living for me and my family. You can always work your way up. There's multiple ladders, and really the sky's the limit. I thought I got to the max with as high as I can go with welding. As high as you want to grow, you can absolutely achieve it.
promoting workplace safety and family wellness. That's our motto at Gulf Coast Occupational Medicine. The Gulf Coast staff is made up of some of the most knowledgeable and hardest working medical professionals in Louisiana. We care about your safety and your bottom line. With 8 convenient locations in the greater Baton Rouge area, our services include injury management, physical exams, medical surveillance, and substance abuse testing. For more information, visit us on the web at gcombr.info and ride the wave to safety.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Greg Bowser, president of the Louisiana Chemical Association, is with us. One of the things that I believe is critically important for the vast majority of Louisianians who don't work in the industry is to understand what these plants produce. Because if you don't work in the industry and you drive by it every day, you see equipment and gates and stacks and stuff, industrial stuff, but you probably don't connect it very well to your daily life. And if you think about what this industry provides for us, that improves the overall quality of our lives, it is significant. Clean water, fresh food, high-tech plastics, electronics, medications. Talk about it all.
Well, I like to say this industry, you touch the industry or it touches your life from the time you wake up till the time you go to bed, even when you're sleeping. So when your alarm clock goes off, when you reach over and turn it off, it's made possible through chemistry. When you get up and you do all the things you do in the morning, shower and all of that, it's better through chemistry. That's why you're able to do that. Drinking water, when you make your coffee in the morning, the fact that you can have your coffee packaged in such a way that it stays fresh till it gets to you, it's because of the chemistry. So it's everywhere that you do, and everybody has a cell phone. And so cell phones exist primarily because of the chemistry behind it. And what we make are products that go into the cell phones and go into your cars and all of that stuff. So it has a great deal to do with everyday life, from the clothes you wear to what you drink in the morning or what you eat throughout the day. And that's the big thing. If it's not for some of the manufacturers, talked about chlorine, for example, that's what keeps our drinking water safe. When you go to a hospital, you look at a hospital, for example, IV bags. That's where it comes from. Blood bags, that's where it comes from. Those are the things that people don't see, and they say, well, we don't need that. Well, I kind of beg to differ with you. And so we need to look at that, and I think people need to stop and think about it for a second. Where would we be if we didn't do that?
Well, you think about 2 plants that are great sponsors of this show, ExxonMobil and Dow, and you think about all of the products that they create and the things that those products go into. I mean, everything to lipstick of all things, right? That this chemistry goes into. So it's a critical part of our lives every day, as you say. And I think, Greg, that the industry overall is doing a better job telling its story. You talked about the engagement that so many of these plants have in their communities. And, the tax base is one thing, right? But if you took ExxonMobil out of Baton Rouge or you took Dow out of Iberville Parish, they wouldn't just lose the tax base. They would lose the support for the schools and the aftercare programs and all of the educational things that they're engaged in and overall community support. It is unnoticed sometimes, but a critical part of what these plants provide.
It is a very critical part. For example, you take the United Way in Baton Rouge, the area that they serve. ExxonMobil is a big contributor to that. When you add in what Exxon gives itself, plus on top of that the employees and the matching grants and all of that go to them, that's huge. BREC is another one, the Recreation Authority here in East Baton Rouge Parish. They benefit from contributions from ExxonMobil. So I think that facilities go above and beyond because part of their corporate culture is to be good local corporate citizens. And that goes big because, again, that's where our employees live and work. I mean, they work there and they live there, their families live there, they raise their families. And I think it's a part that they don't like to brag about, they don't like to talk about. But I think it's going to be a part that has to be more and more out there so people can understand it, as well as knowing what's inside the fence line.
I don't believe there's any question about that. And I think they are doing a better job telling that story and of their engagement. Let's shift gears. Elections have consequences,
They
right?
do. They
You've
do.
been involved in Louisiana politics for most of your career.
Yeah.
We've got some pretty important legislative races this year. We'll see huge turnover in both houses of the legislature. We are going to have a critically important election for governor later this year. Your general perception?
Well, right now the legislature is structured so that you have 62 Republicans in the House of Representatives out of 105. In the state Senate, you've got 22 Republicans out of 39. And so all indications are those numbers will grow. So you're going to have a supermajority of Republicans in both the House and Senate.
A more conservative legislature
overall. Now, that's going to make a difference, because then it depends on who the governor is. If Governor John Bel Edwards wins re-election, he's going to have to deal with that Republican House and Senate that has a 2/3 majority, which means they could pass almost anything on a party line vote and send it to him because you only need a 2/3. And so it will be interesting times. If a Republican happens to win, we'll see what happens. Then he or she can pass anything that they want in terms of reforms. And so it's really an interesting time in Louisiana, because this is the first time, I think at the start of the next legislative session in 2020 will be the first time in the history of the state of Louisiana, I believe, that the governor has not picked the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate.
They will show that independence.
That happened this time.
Right?
For the first time, this past legislative sessions, the House picked its own Speaker. And the governor had someone who he was supporting. That person didn't win. And I think you're going to see that independence in the Senate. And so that will be interesting, because not only will they be able to choose their own president and speaker, their own leadership, they get to choose who's on the committees and what committees they serve on, who's chairs, who's vice chairs. That's going to be an interesting scenario for the next governor.
Something we've got to watch closely. We got about 30 seconds left here. When this show's airs, we'll be in about the third week or so of the current Louisiana legislative session. What are you watching for?
We're just keeping an eye on a number of things. We're trying to do some reforms around the edges. We're supporting some liability, some tort reform issues that are out there. We're doing that. We're also trying to do some things with respect to some of the sales tax, the taxes that that are taxed on manufacturers now, the manufacturing inputs. Well, other states don't tax their inputs. We're asking the state, take a look at that, have the Department of Revenue perhaps draft rules and regulations that makes us match other states at a minimum, and see if we can't ease that burden so that we can be more competitive from that perspective.
Again, it's a competitive issue.
It is.
And listen, the industry is lucky to have you down there every day paying attention to the best interests.
I appreciate that.
Always enjoy visiting with you, my friend.
Good to see you.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.